weekend's off now because give everybody a break, and besides, there's nobody watching right now, anyways.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, we're gonna this week. I didn't see a whole lot going on within like the Marxist community, so I was thinking we'll just be a couple React Andes. We'll watch a couple of Luna Oy videos that she's put out and kind of give our thoughts. And we'll just we'll pause it from time to time.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of like we're thinking about doing this kind of monthly. We were talking before the show, Art and I, and kind of changing it up and not covering content every week because it seems like the same content is being put out or it's slowed down or anything else. So if for anybody watching and have any suggestions, because we're gonna in a couple of weeks we're gonna retool the show a little bit. Drop us a line or post something in our subreddit to get back at us.
Right. So maybe we just get into this. So open up.
And for those of you joining us, want to just give a quick summary on who Lono Oi is again, Art?
So Luna, thanks Andrew. So Luna Oy is the she is a popular YouTuber, and I mean popular as in she's way more popular than us. She does a lot of like she lives in Vietnam, and so there hasn't been a lot of like Vietnamese voices in the Marxist community like that's been like recognized, I think, on the internet in a long time. And so that's kind of contributed to her popularity. She calls herself a Marxist Leninist, which is kind of what the Vietnamese Communist Party calls itself, I think.
Which is a pretty broad term these days.
Yeah, and then she is also partners with an anarchist, which is also who's also a YouTuber. Um, and so that I think that's increased her popularity as well. Um, so yeah, like, uh, so I was thinking we would watch the election video before the nationalism video
Sure.
first, and it and the election video uh is it's on I'm not sure if it was like first published on the channel Means TV or not. But and I know that Luna always said that she's going to Means TV, and I don't know how that's working or not. I don't think it's a good idea myself.
Yeah, I
Um,
never heard of Means TV, but whatever.
well, yeah, like I guess Means TV is supposed to be like a liberal or a left um alternative to YouTube, but it's subscriber based, so you have to pay money to see it. But to me, I think that kind of defeats the purpose because the
Yeah.
thing about YouTube is like it's very accessible to like a very mass audience.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely not doing any favors for the Marxist community limiting that now. I mean, fuck,
Right.
kind of going a step backwards
Yeah,
as we both said
I think
before.
this is even like I think this is definitely a step backwards from even say going to Twitch because like I mean Twitch still has a lot of people. Like look at Hasanabi, he does really good on Twitch.
Yeah.
But Means TV, yeah, like I don't think a lot of people I think haven't heard of it, and then so it's like really just isolating. I think. I mean that's my opinion. So yeah, let's watch this, and uh, I think this is her talking
All
about
about
Vietnamese
failing
elections, but
bourgeois
we'll see.
democracy in the U.S., let's check out how elections were recently conducted in the socialist nation
I
of
have no idea who
Vietnam.
this guy is, by the way.
For that,
Neither.
we go to
So
MMN
I can't enter
correspondent Luna Oy.
Um,
I tell you one thing for better get some better music for production value.
That is like straight out of like the early
a
90s
porn movie or something.
Yeah, that is this whole like newsy kind of overlay. It's very, it reminds me of like very early 90s kind of stuff, you know, like, or maybe late 80s even, like.
Reporting in from Da Nang, Vietnam. About 1 month ago, Vietnam held a general election to choose representatives for our National Assembly and local people's committees. Vietnam hosts general elections every 5 years, using a system loosely based on the Soviet-style election system, but with unique innovations suited to Vietnam's material conditions. Our elections are rooted in Marxist-Leninist principles of democratic centralism, which seeks to balance democratic free speech and open participation with centralized unity in action. Vietnam also follows the Soviet-style election campaign procedures.
Yeah, pause it for a sec here. Because like that's democratic centralism that's being thrown around all over the place.
Yeah,
so,
we've been covering this for years, Andrew.
I don't know if she's going to expand on it or whatever here, but let's hope so. But that didn't tell me anything exactly.
Yeah, it's all I heard was it's Soviet-style elections.
Yeah, and so what was that? What exactly is that?
What does she mean by that exactly? Like, that told me absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Equal opportunity to speak and share their platforms. Nobody is allowed to spend any money on advertising or promotion.
All right, stop there. So she says, I don't know if this is true or not. She says that nobody's allowed to spend money on adverts or promotions. I mean, I think that's good. You know.
I think that's good, but I don't know it. Yeah, I don't know anything about that either.
Yeah, I mean, I can't confirm it or anything. I mean, but yeah, that is good.
Yeah,
that's a huge difference from the United States. That right there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
candidates.
Yeah. What's that?
No, yeah. Go ahead. No.
Are not allowed to seek or give donations for their campaigns. In this way, every candidate has the same amount of time and exposure to constituents when campaigning. In addition,
okay, so all candidates have the same amount of time. They can't solicit for donations.
Yeah.
They can't get or ask for donations, I think. And so that sounds like publicly funded elections.
Yeah.
Right?
any political debates or attacks against other candidates are prohibited in Vietnam.
Wait, I missed that last one.
Yeah, something about attacked.
Let me rewind it a little bit here.
Prohibited in Vietnam.
Political
debate constituents when campaigning. In addition, any political debates or attacks against other candidates are prohibited in Vietnam.
Okay, so debates or attacks against candidates are prohibited.
Well, that's stupid.
Yeah,
I mean, slandering is one thing, but debating and attacking somebody's policy,
sure,
that's central. That's central to a democracy.
Right. Yeah, like, well, what if they're doing a bad job?
Yeah.
When presenting their platforms, candidates aren't allowed to address or talk about each other. They are required to focus on their own platforms, plans, concerns, and goals, and to answer questions from constituents in the audience. These policies are intended to keep candidates focused on the concerns of citizens and their own policies, rather than the spectacle of debate and personal attacks. Each candidate is given equal time to speak and present their platforms in local community meetings directly to constituencies. This year, meetings were held virtually and streamed to small local gatherings, both to decrease the risk of COVID-19 and to make it more convenient for local residents to attend meetings. 16 days after the elections were held, on June 10th, Vietnam just announced 499 candidates who officially became national representatives, up from 483 in the previous 5-year term. Contrary to many reports from Western NGOs and media outlets, candidates do not need to be Communist Party members to seek election in Vietnam, and independent candidates are not filtered out by the Fatherland Front. The Fatherland
Pause it for a sec. Yeah, so that was on my mind, if you have to be a member of the Communist Party or not. So how do you, so does that mean anybody can run? Do you know?
It sounded that way.
It sounded that way. If so, then that's good, because I remember, I mean, Ben had said something about like, member of Communist Party or something like that. I mean, because I know in China you have to be, right? A
I
member of the
think so.
Communist Party.
Yeah, I think so. Oh.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's got to be some sort of, I would like to know more about the vetting process,
Yeah, like
or
that.
how you get to that stage in municipal areas or whatever.
All right, let's move on, huh?
Okay.
known
Is that
as
all that
Na-
it, okay, yeah. There's
Chợ
still
Tổ
more
quốc
of it,
Việt
right?
Nam, which
Yeah, we're about halfway
directly
done.
translates to National Front of Vietnam, is the political base of the people's power in Vietnam. It consists of 44 member organizations, including the Communist Party of Vietnam, the National Women's Union, the Vietnam Zero Confederation of Labor, which represent workers' unions in Vietnam, the Vietnam Ho Chi Minh Communist Youth Union, ethnic minority groups, and many others. Notably, out of 1,000 committee members of the Fatherland Front of Vietnam, only about 200 members come from the Communist Party and the government combined. The Fatherland Front does oversee candidate approval in Vietnam, but no candidate has ever been barred from seeking election for political purposes. In this election, out of 499 national representatives, we have 14 people who are non-party members, which is about 2.8% of the national electorate. Compare that to the USA Senate and House of Representatives, which combined has only 4 senators and representatives who are independent or third-party candidates, less than 0.75%. So, Vietnam has nearly 4 times as many independent national representatives than the USA. While 15% of the population of Vietnam are ethnic minorities, in this election, 18% of National Assembly members are ethnic minorities. Also, the number of women represented in our National Assembly increased from about 26% to 30%. If you want to learn more about election in Vietnam, check out my video, How do Election Work in Vietnam, on my channel, Loon ơi, right here on Means TV.
Okay, so
Okay, so why are all those shots of the US Congress and stuff? I mean, I don't.
I mean, I think it was like she was like, oh yeah, because they have like basically no third party candidates in the United States Congress,
Yeah.
and then but there's like 2.8%, I think, third party candidates in Vietnam,
Yeah.
something like that. But
That
I felt
honestly,
like that wasn't. I felt like I didn't really learn much from that.
me neither. Like, so my biggest question is like, so yeah, so if you don't have to be a member of the Communist Party and you can run for election, then how does that translate into like, yeah,
Right.
from getting there to forming a government or whatever? I mean, I understand, we talked about this a little ways back with Ben too. I mean, I understand, I mean, country like that, you have to, I mean, you obviously need to outlaw like a communist, or I mean capitalist parties that advocate for capitalism, but
Right.
I mean, more than one party, is central to democracy. So I just don't understand how that works. How that, if you're not part of the Communist Party, then how, why is there even a Communist Party then?
Yeah, that
If you're just going to run candidates, I don't know. That didn't tell me much.
yeah, I didn't really feel like I understood it like a whole lot better than before the video.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's check out what she says about nationalism here.
Is in your mug, and I would just tell them.
Vietnam. Usually this means debunk.
I'll rewind it a little bit here.
One of the main reasons why I started this channel is because I see so much misinformation and misunderstanding about my country, Vietnam. Usually, this means debunking misinformation and distortion by anti-communist Western media and NGOs. But unfortunately, sometimes I also see misinformation and misunderstanding coming from Western leftists on social media. And one of the most misunderstood aspects of the socialist ideology of Vietnam is our nationalism. To many Western leftists, the word nationalism is
I gotta pause it. The freaking music is crazy, dude.
I'm not really hearing much of it this time, but
okay, yeah, it's kind of like horror movie kind of music with like a piano like playing like a what do you call it, like you know when they I can't remember what they call that technique.
So basically, it's not doing the Marxist community any favors having horror music playing in the background.
It's killing me, man. All right, anyway, I just wanted to get that out there.
Okay.
Particularly a dirty word associated with right-wing fascists who believe their nation is superior to other nations. This is one form of nationalism, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the nationalism of many movements of indigenous, colonized, and oppressed peoples, including Vietnam. So I want to say this right away. The nationalism I am discussing today is not the same thing at all as right-wing nationalism. You know, some people say
the Nazis were national socialists.
Okay, I don't really. I'm kind of on the fence with like the whole like left wing versus right wing nationalism dichotomy that she's setting up here.
Yeah, because I mean, there's enough confusion with like with the whole like the National Socialist Party of like Hitler and Germany and fascism, and so I'm not really I mean, I know
yeah, and so like I think it's more accurate to say like bourgeois nationalism, right? And anyway, let's continue. Let's see what she has to say here.
That means socialism is bad.
You know how ridiculous and annoying that is? Well, that's how Vietnamese communists feel when we hear people say,
the Nazi were national socialists. That means nationalism is bad.
Friends would walk up
sorry,
to me
I'm getting
like,
killed by an ad here.
Your mug? And I would just tell them,
if you insist that right-wing nationalism and Vietnamese and other forms of left-wing nationalism are the same thing just because they are both called nationalism, then I guess you think black pepper and chili pepper are the same. And I guess you think...
Right. I don't know about comparing nationalism to peppers, but
yeah, that was.
But I understand that like there is like a lot of skepticism, especially with the anarchists. I think of like all forms of nationalism in every context, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so like there's not an understanding of like context, and so like I understand that like.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, I think because we have seen this video, but
right.
She does. I mean, we do need to. This is a topic that needs to be discussed because I mean, because I mean, Vietnam is certainly no North Korea, and I mean, that kind of nationalism is quite different from what's happening in Vietnam. So, I think it's good to have this discussion, but then just comparing it against right-wing nationalism, well, I don't know what that means because to me, what goes on in North Korea is quite similar to like, the right-wing nationalism that she's kind of setting up here. Right. So, anyways.
Oh, one thing I noticed is I don't have access to it. Let me see if I have access to the chat here, just in case anybody does show up and messages us. All right, there we go. All right, I'll continue here.
think the Eiffel Tower can be found in Paris Hilton. It's like saying right-wing libertarianism and libertarian socialism are the same, or anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-communism are the same thing. They are not the same at all. So let's talk about left-wing and indigenous nationalism and the nationalism of Vietnam. Hopefully after watching this video, you will have a better understanding and you will know that our nationalism has nothing in common with right-wing nationalism. In fact, they are total opposites. But before I begin talking about Vietnamese nationalism, I should probably define what right-wing nationalism is, just so you can tell the difference.
You should.
Right-wing nationalism is a chauvinistic belief that one's nation is superior to other nations. It means putting the interests of your own nation above the interests of other nations, and seeing nationality as the most defining aspect of one's identity. This kind of chauvinistic nationalism is usually tied to exceptionalism, the belief that one's nation is somehow exceptional, or gifted with some unique quality that makes it better than any other nation. Of course, that means that
This music is so distracting. I don't know if you hear
barely hear it, so I'm glad I can't. Yeah.
It's like drama music, dude.
I don't like that emoji over her face either.
I don't either. Yeah. Yeah, it's just distracting. Like
right-wing nationalists also usually believe that other nations are inferior, which has often used as justification for colonizing, exploiting, and oppressing other nations. So now that you understand the right-wing nationalism, let's take a look at the leftist nationalist philosophy of Ho Chi Minh. As you probably already know, Ho Chi Minh was Vietnam's communist leader who led the two biggest resistance wars of Vietnam against colonialist France and imperialist USA. Because of his very important role in the communist movement, both in Vietnam and internationally, the story of Ho Chi Minh has been distorted by anti-communists from all over the world. One of the most common ways of distorting the truth about Ho Chi Minh is to distort his nationalism. Some anti-communists try to paint Ho Chi Minh as almost exclusively a nationalist, downplaying his communist ideology, as was the case with the armchair historian's quote-unquote history of the Vietnam War from the Vietnamese perspective.
As he himself stated, at first patriotism, not yet communism. America never fully grasped that it was the desire for liberty, not communism, that motivated the North Vietnamese to fight on against the odds.
The idea is to make it seem like Ho Chi Minh didn't really care about communism. He was really guided by nationalism. This is because anti-communists don't want you to believe that communism was really that popular in Vietnam. They don't want you to believe that a communist could have been as universally respected as Ho Chi Minh. But as we will see later in this video, Ho Chi Minh's nationalism was intrinsically tied with communism, and all his philosophies were built on the foundation of Marxist-Leninist communist ideology. Another way that
okay. I gotta pause there.
Okay.
So
what
like,
what are you thinking here, Art?
okay, so there is definitely like some nationalist ideas with Ho Chi Minh, right? And but
Yeah, that's what I was like. For any unity within a country that's trying to pull itself together, there has to be some sort of, nationalistic sense.
But
Don't you think? Absolutely.
yeah, and the context is Vietnam was a colony,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't always a colony, but it was a colony by the French and then later by the Americans. And so I think like, it's important to recognize that Vietnam was it was a colony, and I think hopefully she's gonna get to like national liberation, and
Yeah.
like, because like liberated as a colony from the French, and like the right of self-determination, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of important discussion, national liberation, that we need to be having within this. Yeah,
that
absolutely.
anti-communists and even many leftists try to attack Ho Chi Minh is by saying that he was a right-wing ultra-nationalist and that his branch of nationalism was exactly the same as the nationalism of fascists and bourgeois conservatives.
All right. Yeah, I gotta pause it again.
Okay.
I haven't heard the argument that Ho Chi Minh was a right-wing nationalist, or a Nazi or anything like. I've never heard of that. So that's if Luna Oy has heard that, then yeah.
I mean, I've heard that about about the USSR and stuff.
Yeah.
Equating it the same as like Nazism and stuff, but yeah, I haven't heard that about Vietnam.
Yeah, I haven't heard about Vietnam. So yeah, like I haven't heard that argument before. I don't think to me, that's not a big deal. Like that's like a non-issue basically.
Yeah.
Again, this is
because if some fringe element of the left says that, who cares?
Ho Chi Minh has absolutely nothing to do with a belief in the superiority of Vietnam over other nations, nor the chauvinist notion that Vietnam is exceptional. These attacks extend to Vietnamese people in general. And in fact, I'm often attacked by Western leftists as an
ultra-nationalist pretending to be communist, just like Ho Chi Minh.
Well, as much as I am flattered to be compared to Uncle Ho, I am afraid that this statement is just complete nonsense. If you know anything at all about Vietnamese...
Okay, so she said that she's being called a Vietnamese nationalist, right?
Yeah.
And by her critics. I'm guessing that it's anarchist critics that are saying this because her partner's an anarchist.
Yeah.
Like this sounds like some anarcho kitty kind of criticism, and like big deal.
Yeah.
Nationalism. If you look at the history of Vietnam, you will see that Vietnam has been a victim of oppressive right-wing nationalism for centuries. White supremacist French colonialists conquered and enslaved Vietnamese people for over a century as a result of French colonialism.
Oh shit! I just realized.
Yeah.
I think I have your
armchair.
face.
Yeah, we watched a video on that because they had an exchange a while back with the armchair historian. So, I mean, we all know that that's well documented.
Aspect of one's identity.
Oh, I think I just lost it. You know, it's like I gotta find a place.
Manscaped. Yeah, your balls. Oh, thank you. Today, I've got a first look and hands-on with their new
terrible advertisements there about ball shaving.
Anything at all about Vietnamese
ball shaving?
Oh, you didn't hear it?
No.
Dude, let me just take a break here. The advertisements on YouTube, I've noticed they're getting worse. Like,
yeah,
like it's like, here's a razor for your balls, and then like the next advertisement will be like, do you have your poop backed up? Here's a magical elixir to clean out your bowels. Like,
I don't know, man. Maybe the algorithms are set differently for you than me, but I'm not getting ball shaving and laxative videos in my advertisements, dude.
I don't know if there's any way to fix it. Like,
at the history of Vietnam, you will see that Vietnam has been a victim of oppressive right-wing nationalism for centuries. Out of French conquered and enslaved Vietnamese people for over a century.
Let's get the history lesson,
as a
Luna.
result of French colonialist nationalism. Fascist Japan ruthlessly plundered from our nation and drove us into famine because of their fascist nationalism. The USA committed genocide against Vietnam in an invasionary war that killed 2 million Vietnamese civilians with napalm, carpet bombing of population centers, and illegal chemical weapons like Agent Orange for well over a decade because of capitalist imperialist nationalism. Whenever nations are brutally dominated and oppressed like Vietnam was, that is when we develop a need for left-wing nationalism. As Kwame
Okay,
Ture,
pause it for a
a
sec. I just
prominent
want to,
organizer,
since we were on this top, we've covered this topic. I do agree that genocide is a correct term to be used here. Do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial. Not for me.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Now she said like now we have a reason to have nationalism because of these things, right?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Well, let's go on though.
in the civil rights movement in the United States and the global Pan-African movement explains.
Nationalism, of course, must be properly understood. We left this one for last. In Europe, their formation and their political formation started with nations and went to state structures. Colonized countries start from state structures and go to nations. The difference must be properly appreciated. If one already has a nation and one is going to a state, there's no need to use nationalism. As a matter of fact, here it will lead to chauvinism. But if one has a state structure and one is trying to build a nation, one has to use nationalism. For example, if one would look at the formation of European states, even Germany, France, England, one would see that the nations themselves already began to have formation before they went to state structure. If one would look at Africa today, if one would look at South and Central America today, if one would look at Asia today, one would see what they really have is state structures which they had to fight for against colonialism. In fact, they inherited the state structures of the colonial power, and they're now building a nation. Therefore, they must use nationalism to build it up. When the indigenous people of Hawaii seize state power in Hawaii, they will have to use nationalism to bring back Hawaiians to be proud of Hawaii, to be proud of the tradition, to use their culture, etc., etc. Therefore, here, nationalism is necessary.
What Ture is talking about here might be...
Who is that?
That's
Who's
Kwame
talking
Ture.
there?
So that was Stokely Carmichael.
Oh, Stokely Carmichael. Okay.
Yeah, Kwame Ture.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really agree with his formulation there.
Yeah.
Like, well, like I like it's definitely not. I don't, like he's saying, right, that you have a state and then, well, now you need to build a nation from the state, and so you need nationalism to do it. I don't think so.
I don't think so, and I think we've shown that can be a dangerous line too.
Right.
With trying to unify under one, religion, or which is often the time, or ethnicity group, which has, led to, there definitely needs to be unity, but yeah, I mean, the kind of national unity we've seen in the past has not always been, well, for the most part, it's been pretty.
Yeah. Should we continue here?
Yeah.
Be difficult for people living in developed Western capitalist imperialist nations to understand, because your histories are so different from our histories in the colonized global South. Africa, Asia, South America, and indigenous people all over the world have had state structures imposed on us by your imperialist, colonialist nations, and our own cultural natural identities were severely suppressed. In Vietnam, our native culture was severely suppressed and obliterated by French colonizers, and the French tried to strip all national identity away from us. They called our country French Indochina and lumped us together with Laos and Cambodia as their colonial subjects. They saw us as little more than slaves and resources to be used and discarded. Our humanity was withheld from us under French colonial rule, while the French themselves used their subjugation of the Vietnamese to bolster their own national identity as conquerors and quote-unquote civilizers. In this context, Vietnamese people came to yearn from our own freedom, our own own self-determination and the freedom to express ourselves and our culture without such subjugation. In these circumstances, the desire of a colonized people for freedom, independence, and self-determination is what we call nationalism. It's simply the desire to not be subjugated by others, to not be conquered and exploited, to not have our culture.
So how does she define that as opposed to anti-imperialist? I mean,
well, I mean, what she's she said the desire for self-determination and to not be conquered and stuff is nationalist. I don't really think so.
No,
I don't think that falls under the category of being called nationalist.
Yeah.
And our self-expression ripped away from us. That is leftist liberation nationalism. And that was the nationalism of
I don't think there's any need to use the term nationalism in that. You know, like I don't understand why she feels the need to use that phrase.
Of Ho Chi Minh. That was nationalism that Vietnamese people like my grandfather and millions of others fought and died for. The nationalism of freedom and independence.
Chiến tranh có thể kéo dài 5 năm, 10 năm, 20 năm, song nhân dân Việt Nam chết không sợ. Không có gì quý hơn độc lập tự do.
Whoa, you've got on $68 shorts. Fabletics Men wants to learn how we can make our
It's an
new
advert.
fundamental short.
I can't skip it yet.
You can't stop it?
I just did. Like, it's a 5-second advert.
So we do not think that we are superior. We do not think that our countries are better. We just want other countries to stop oppressing and exploiting our people. That is our nationalism, and that is what you must understand. Sadly, many leftists, especially from the West, terribly lack knowledge about this. All they encounter their whole life is right-wing fascistic nationalism. To them, nationalism just means right-wing nationalism. Why do you think this way? Well, it's because the right-wing nationalists get so much national attention. White supremacists get all the media attention, all the platforms, all the freedom they want to express and articulate their own ideas of nationalism. But how often do you see indigenous people expressing ourselves? How often do you hear directly from Vietnamese people like me? From indigenous Hawaiians like Silver Spook? From Pan-Africanists like Kwame Ture? Maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop telling Black and indigenous people what we mean when we say nationalism, and start listening to us explaining what we mean instead. It's very strange for me to see liberals, anti-communists, and even many leftists in the West suddenly joining the same team attack Black people, indigenous people, and countries like Vietnam, Cuba, and Laos. And why? Because we want your Western imperialist countries to leave us alone. That desire which we call nationalism. And you want to take even that desire for freedom and independence from your nations away from us? In Vietnamese, the word nationalism is chủ nghĩa yêu nước. This is usually translated as nationalism or sometimes as patriotism. Ho Chi Minh, in his lifetime,
pause that for a sec. So that definition should have been right at the beginning, I think, if she wants to go that route. Because bringing this up now, I mean, this should have been clarified from the start a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, like,
she's making a weird argument, or like, it's kind of, crossing between a few different terms here.
I mean, having like pushing for national unity to overthrow a colonial power or something. I mean, I think what she's not saying is it's completely unavoidable, because like capitalism, like it basically creates all these different nations, right? And like territories. And so like you're locked into that territory. Like because there's a capitalist class within that territory that manages that territory, right? And so, so there is a certain need to unify with people within that territory to, overthrow a colonial power or the state or whatever. And so that's kind of unavoidable. I think she's kind of missed that point.
Extensively about chủ nghĩa yêu nước. Now let's see what he actually said. From the very beginning of his political journey, Ho Chi Minh was interested in liberating the people of Vietnam. Yes, that much is very clear. But he was also an internationalist. And that's one of the things you have to understand about leftist liberation nationalism. While right-wing chauvinist nationalism directly opposed internationalism, left-wing nationalism has a dialectically productive relationship with internationalism. In other words, our nationalism goes hand in hand with internationalism, because what we want is for all people to be free from oppression by external nations. In the 1920s, while living in France, Ho Chi Minh wrote extensively about the oppression of the colonized peoples of the French Empire from an internationalist perspective. In a 1923 article in a French newspaper called Oppression Hits All Races, Ho Chi Minh wrote,
"All the martyrs of the working class, those in Lausanne like those in Paris, those in Le Havre like those in Martinique, are victims of the same murderer, international capitalism. And it is always in belief in the liberation of their oppressed brothers, without discrimination as to race or country, that the souls of these martyrs will find supreme consolation."
In addition, during this period, Ho Chi Minh wrote...
So this is what, so now it's, because she's trying to, it sounds like the same argument for internationalism.
Yeah, I mean,
free from oppression. I mean, we get that. I mean,
that wasn't a very nationalist quote.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a contradiction between nationalism and internationalism, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that Luna Oy is basically revealing that there's a contradiction there. She's saying that certain kinds of nationalism are compatible with internationalism or something.
Yeah.
Or are internationalist, and I think that creates confusion.
And how does that differentiate between bourgeois globalization and because I mean, she's not really saying too much about, I mean, I think these are, because I think that's really
and the other thing is
confused in the community there.
Is I thought that her argument was to explain how Vietnam is not nationalist.
Yeah.
Or to explain the left-wing nationalism in Vietnam, or what, which is her words, right? And I haven't heard any of that. Instead, it's kind of like a response to her critics, and then followed by a little history lesson with Ho Chi Minh.
And you don't hear any, voices of like, how are the people in Vietnam trying to make this Vietnam an internationalist movement or whatever.
And we used to be and we were oppressed and we were colonized. Israel makes the same freaking arguments.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Is Israel nationalist? I mean, yes. Yeah. So
many articles about
though far more obvious.
atrocities and suffering in French colonies in Africa, Western Asia, and Northern Africa, not just Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh understood that for the brutally oppressed colonial subjects of the French Empire, nationalism was the gateway into internationalism, and that all the various national independence movements of the empire should be forced together into a wider internationalist movement. In a letter written in 1923 to his fellow activists in France, Ho Chi Minh wrote,
"Even though we are different races, different nationalities, and different religions, we love each other as brothers and sisters. We all bear the same misery, the violence of colonial tyranny. We fight for a common idea, to liberate our compatriots and gain independence for our nations.
Ho Chi Minh even wrote a declaration of the Association of Oppressed Peoples on May 7, 1925, writing,
"If the imperialists oppress us and treat us like animals, it is because we do not unite. If we unite, we become formidable. We are thousands, and our enemies are just a handful in comparison."
But it was not just colonized people that Ho Chi Minh was concerned with. Ho Chi Minh distinguished between national revolutions of the colonized, but saw them as directly linked to the world revolution of the working class. In The Terrible Crimes of French Colonialism in Indochina, written in 1927, Ho Chi Minh called on French workers and colonial subjects to struggle together for revolution.
Vietnam's revolution and the French Revolution must communicate with each other. We must form a tight alliance between the Metropolitan Proletarian Revolution and the National Liberation Revolutions of colonial subjects. Only this new collaboration will ensure that the international working class wins its final victory.
In The Army Against the Revolution, Ho Chi Minh wrote,
"The thing that the working class in France doesn't understand is that capitalism uses its colonies to fight against every liberation movement that you are planning. The French bourgeoisie uses the natives of Africa and Asia to replace white workers. French workers have a duty to act. They must have solidarity with natives. They have to make natives understand that even the workers in France share the same exploitation and slavery and oppression. So we are the same class, and it's time to fight. The two sides together can defeat the same masters which oppress them both. We are brothers, and brothers should not fight each other."
So you see,
I don't think
these are examples of nationalism.
Yeah.
These are all internationalist examples.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah.
of nationalism was completely compatible with internationalism. In fact, to Ho Chi Minh, national liberation hinged entirely with internationalist cooperation, mutual respect, and solidarity, and the end goal of nationalism was international peace, freedom, and unity, without fear of exploitation of conquest from foreign colonialists. Ho Chi Minh sought to restore pride to the Vietnamese people without resorting to chauvinism or exceptionalism. In 1951, in a report for the Second Congress of our Labor Party, the previous name of our Communist Party, Ho Chi Minh wrote,
"Our people have ardent patriotic hearts. It's one of our precious traditions. From time immemorial, every time our motherland was invaded, that spirit became vibrant. It formed a huge and powerful wave. It surmounted all dangers and difficulties. It drowned all the country sellers and country robbers. In our history, there have been many great resistance wars proving the patriotism of our people. We have the right to be proud of the glorious historical pages of the eras of Ba Chung, Ba Chio, Chan Hung Dao, Lê Loi, and Quang Trung. We must remember the merits of national heroes because they represent a heroic nation. Our compatriots today are also very worthy of our ancestors. From gray-haired old people to young children, from overseas compatriots to compatriots in temporarily occupied areas, from people from upland to lowland, everyone is passionately patriotic and hates the invaders. From soldiers in the front who went hungry for days to stick to the enemy, to destroy them, to civil servants in the rear who fasted to support the army, from women who advised their husbands and children to join the army and who volunteered to help with transportation, to soldiers' mothers who took care of the army like their own children. From male and female workers and peasants emulating to increase production, no matter how hard it is to help a part in the resistance war, to compatriots who donated their land for the government, those noble gestures, though different in their deeds, are the same in their patriotic fervor. Patriotism, like all precious things, sometimes is displayed in glass cabinets, in crystal vases, clearly visible. But sometimes it was hidden in a chest, in a box. It is our duty to make those hidden treasures put on display. That is, we must try our best to explain, propagate, organize, lead, and make everyone's patriotism practice in patriotic work and resistance work."
Notice that Ho Chi Minh's national pride is a pride of sacrifice, a pride of self-defense and self-reliance, a pride in resisting oppression and invasion. It's not a pride in conquest or domination of others. It's not a pride in racial or cultural superiority. It's simply a pride in resilience and self-sacrifice for the greater good. These values are completely different from the nationalist values of right-wingers who talk about the greatness and superiority of their nations.
Okay, pause it for a sec. So I think she should have, if she wanted to nail this point home a little bit more, she should have gave examples of how Vietnam liberated, the surrounding countries when they were invaded. I mean, that would have, maybe she should have talked about that a little bit more, because I think there is a difference between, definitely a difference between Vietnam, the way Vietnam has handled itself, and the way like USSR has, put up, these satellite communists.
Well,
So-called
she hasn't
communist
talked
satellite
anything
countries.
about contemporary Vietnam.
What?
She hasn't said anything about contemporary Vietnam.
Yeah.
Like about Vietnam in 2021.
Yeah.
Ho Chi Minh never talk about Vietnam being superior to other countries because that has never been an aspect of Vietnamese nationalism. And it's vital to understand that Ho Chi Minh's nationalism was inseparably linked to internationalism, as Ho Chi Minh wrote.
Our nationalism is totally different from the nationalism of the reactionary imperialist. It is a part of the international spirit. It was this spirit of nationalism which helped Russian soldiers defeat fascist Japan and fascist Germany. It was this spirit of nationalism which brought victory to the China's Liberation Army against Chiang Kai-shek and the invading American imperialists. It was this spirit of nationalism which allowed the people and army of North Korea, along with the volunteer army from China, to win against imperialist America and its allies. And it is this spirit of nationalism which helps our people and our army to bear the misery, to fight all our enemies, to build an independent and free Vietnam with the dream of building a rich country with a new democracy.
Now, there's still a kind of debate in Vietnam about what we should use, patriotism or nationalism.
So
yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Ho Chi Minh's quote there, I think it creates, what he said can create some problems.
Yeah, I mean, she's had some pretty good videos before, but we have to think about, like you said, who her audience is, and she's mostly, unlike us, she's more agitation,
right,
than we are, and I think keeping that in mind, she needs to be clearer about and define some of the terms she's throwing around too, and like she talks about reactionary forces and stuff, like that from other countries. There's a lot of things, if she's trying to reach out. I think this is kind of a muddled mess so far.
Yeah, and just because Ho Chi Minh is right on some things, it doesn't mean he's always gonna be right. That's another thing. They provided like a couple quotes that say we agree with because they're internationalists, and then they give us this quote, right? Well, it's like, well, just because Ho Chi Minh's right here, it doesn't mean he's gonna be right when he says this, because it's like, yeah, it might seem harmless while Vietnam is a colony and they're fighting the Americans and stuff. But Vietnam is no longer a colony; it's a nation, right? It's its own independent country, and so it's like there are concerns that that I have, that when you say that kind of rhetoric, and if you don't like provide a disclaimer to it, it's like, okay, well, it's like yeah, nationalism is it's probably not in the best interest of the working class,
Yeah, I don't think she's, I've liked some of her other stuff, but I don't think she's contextualized things very well here.
Like national unity between workers to have a goal, like to overthrow a colonial power and invading power, or or for a national strike. That's not nationalism, right? But once you start kind of fetishizing the nation, I think it can create a dangerous road in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, on top of it, I mean, so far she's glossed over. I mean, yeah, they overthrew an imperial force, but what happened to, why was it divided in the first place? What with the U.S. and I don't know. There's I think she's bit off more than she could shoot here in this one video, trying to put it all together.
Well, my problem is that she doesn't explain what it's like today.
Yeah.
You know,
which how did it how yeah, I mean, how
did it turn out?
How did it turn out from there, from a country like from war to the nationalism we see today, and there's nothing of that so far. And considering the video is based on that, I think that's an important thing not to be glossed over.
Translate the word 主nghĩa yêu nước into English. Some English-speaking Vietnamese don't want to use the word nationalism because they are afraid that the West will misunderstand its real meaning. In my opinion, the word patriotism doesn't convey the right meaning, since it simply means love and emotional connection to your country. The word nationalism, on the other hand, has a deeper and wider definition going back centuries, and I think it's much more appropriate as translation of 主nghĩa yêu nước as we use it in Vietnam. Some people say you should come up with some new word, or else people will confuse you for fascists.
I don't think nationalism goes back that many centuries.
Why don't you just go by Mike instead of Michael?
No way. Why should I change? He's the one who sucks.
Why the hell should we stop using that word just because a bunch of
That is such a great Office Space quote, by the way. I don't know if you've seen that movie, Andrew.
Which one?
Office Space.
No.
That's where that clip comes from.
Oh.
And okay, so it's kind of an inside joke. So there's this character. His name's Michael Bolton, and
that's the singer,
right? And so everywhere he goes, people are like, "Are you related to Michael Bolton, the singer?"
Yeah.
And he hates Michael Bolton. He's like into gangster rap. And so in that scene, someone's like, "Hey, why don't you change your name to something else?" and this reminds me of like Frank Arango and like different Marxist-Leninists and Ben Seattle. And it's like when they're talking about Marxists and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, why should I change? It's them that sucks. You know, like, they're the revisionists.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a great quote, but yeah, I mean, as far as like nationalism goes, I don't think it helps her point that much. It's like, okay, here's the logic, Andrew. It's like, okay, like it's like it'd be like the same logic of you being a part of a fucked up group, right? And you wear all the same uniform or whatever as that group, and you got the same flag, and you say the same things, and you're like, but I'm not a part of that group. They're the ones that's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And
there's enough of it. There's definitely too much of that in the community right now, with the way people outside of the community look have a understanding of what communism or Marxism should be.
Right.
So yeah, good point.
Northern Westerner who have no interest in listening to us anyway feel uncomfortable seeing it. It's their problem. They have to deal with it. If they want to learn, we can help educate them. But if they just want to drown in their own ignorance, let them be. It's us
cue
who feel
drama
sorry
music.
for them, not the other way around. And this goes beyond Vietnamese nationalism. Oppressed peoples around the world use the word nationalism to refer to their struggles for liberation. We have Black nationalism, Irish nationalism, Puerto Rico nationalism, and so on. Are you saying that millions of oppressed people all over the world now have to change our language to make our own oppressors feel more comfortable? Let's see what other leftist nationalists have had to say on this subject. First, let's hear from Comrade Fidel Castro, the late communist leader of Cuba, said.
So, Bespoke Post, they just send you a
Sorry about
box
that.
every
To add.
This is good, awesome.
Si nosotros tenemos un día que renunciar a nuestra bandera que tanto amamos, renunciamos y ello hay que hacerlo en aras de la integración y la unidad política de América Latina. Para nosotros eso es un valor
What's that?
Oh, I just realized that the subtitles are not on. Let me read the subtitles
Si nosotros tenemos un día que renunciar a nuestra
Castro, the late communist leader
because
of
you
Cuba,
can't
said.
see the subtitles. It says if someday we feel that we need to abandon our beloved flag,
Si nosotros tenemos un día que renunciar a nuestra bandera que tanto amamos, renunciamos y ello hay que hacerlo.
we'll do it, and if it must be done as prelude to the integration and political unity of Latin America.
En aras de la integración y la unidad política de América Latina. Para nosotros eso es un valor
For us, that is a supreme value.
trascendente. Como si un día quieren organizar un
Just
Estado
as if
mundial
someday the
justo,
world wanted to organize a just world.
trascendente. Como si un día quieren organizar un
Government.
Estado mundial justo, no un mundo bajo la batuta
Not a world under the heel and domination of a superpower that imposes its rule.
y el dominio de una superpotencia que quiere establecer el orden. Si un mundo, la humanidad va a
If
avanzar
humanity advanced so far that it began to consider universal economic and political integration,
tanto que en pensar en una integración económica y política universal, nosotros también renunciaríamos.
we would give up our flag because we're internationalists. He didn't say he's a nationalist.
Nuestra bandera porque somos internacionalistas. No somos chauvinistas.
We're not chauvinists. You notice, actually, I'm glad that he made that right away. He's like, we're internationalists because the other team is chauvinism.
Yeah.
We're not chauvinists and we're not hidebound nationalists.
Yeah.
Somos patriotas, amamos
We're
nuestra
patriots. We love our country, so where they're from.
patria. Respetamos y exaltamos los valores
Respect and uphold
nacionales.
our national values,
Nuestra filosofía
but our
fundamentalmente
philosophy
la
is fundamentally that of internationalism.
Luego estamos mucho
See,
más
that's a
preocupados.
better explanation.
And this makes
That's
us
better
much more
clarity than what
prepared
she's
for
done.
yeah, and this makes us much more prepared for integration than anyone else.
Que nadie para las integraciones. Nuestro pueblo, su educación
The political education of our people makes them more than ready to step in this direction.
política lo hace más apto para cualquier paso en esta dirección. Señor presidente.
Next, we have a James Connolly, a great Irish Republican, socialist and trade union leader who also recognized that nationalism must go
I don't think
hand in
Fidel
hand with
Castro helps her
socialism
case.
to bring about true liberation.
If you remove the English army tomorrow and hoist the green flag over Dublin Castle, unless you set about the organization of the Socialist Republic, your efforts will be in vain. England will still rule you. She will rule you through her capitalists, through her landlords, through her financiers, through the whole array of commercial and individualist institutions she has planted in this country and watered with the tears of our mothers and the blood of our martyrs.
James Connolly, like Ho Chi Minh, urged the English working class to have international solidarity with Irish revolutionists and recognize that the division between Irish and English workers weakens the working class and strengthens capitalism.
Every industrial and commercial center in England now possesses a working class divided into two hostile camps.
None of this is like an argument for left-wing nationalism, by the way.
Yeah. No.
English proletarians and Irish proletarians. The ordinary English worker hates the Irish worker as a competitor who lowers his standard of life. This antagonism is artificially kept alive and intensified by the press, the pulpit, the comic papers, in short, by all the means at the disposal of the ruling class. This antagonism is the secret of the impotence of the English working class despite its organization. It is the secret by which the capitalist class maintains its power, and the latter is quite aware of this. The sole means of hastening it is to make Ireland independent. Hence, it is the task of the International everywhere to put the conflict between England and Ireland in the foreground and everywhere to side openly with Ireland. It is the special task of the Central Council in London to make the English workers realize that for them, the national emancipation of Ireland is not a question of abstract justice or humanitarian sentiment, but the first condition of their own social emancipation. However it may be for others, for us of the Citizen Army, there is but one ideal. An Ireland ruled and owned by Irish men and women, sovereign and independent from the center to the sea, and flying its own flag outward over all the oceans.
Wow, that sounds a lot like Ho Chi Minh's appeals to French workers to support the cause of Vietnamese independence. I hope by now you can understand why oppressed and colonized people all over the world have developed nationalism to build the path towards socialism and international unity.
Wait, no.
Well, I do, but not because of watching this video.
As long as strong, wealthy nations are able to colonize and oppress smaller, weaker nations, we will never have any hope for building international communism. This is why left-wing nationalism, indigenous nationalism, liberation nationalism will be critical towards building international unity and eventually abolishing class and states altogether to build the world all communists dream of. I will end my video with great words of Karl Marx, a beloved communist who, came up with Marxism. He said,
Since the proletariat must first of all acquire political supremacy, must rise to be the leading class of the nation, must constitute itself the nation, it is so far itself national, though not in the bourgeois sense of the word.
Not in the bourgeois sense of the word. Yeah, anyway. Yeah. I thought that was weak.
Would you say weak sauce?
Yeah, it's pretty weak sauce. That was
Yeah. I mean, I like some of her videos, but that was just a hodgepodge of confusion for a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I have to agree.
Yeah.
So anyway,
sorry, Luna, you've done better. Have you looked at any of the comments in the video? Let me see here.
Do you want to look at the comments here? I'll scroll down a little bit here.
If there's any noteworthy comments here. Great, thank you. Wow, so cool. I wish the USA would try it. Oh, that's elections. Oops, wrong one. All right. So far, it's just ass kissing in that one. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't see. I don't see any very critical comments here. See anything yet?
No, I don't really see anything too interested in.
No, everybody's praising. I'm like, huh? I don't know, man. You've done better. This was not. I think this could be pretty confusing for people, especially outside the Marxist community. And her channel is very much based on agitation.
Anthony Veniant, cool video. I'd like to address a few things. I am an anarchist from Poland. If anyone interested where my perspective is coming from, the concept you called left-wing nationalism as opposed to right-wing one is often called national liberation as opposed to nationalism. I think that phrasing it that way is conveying the message more clearly. But this is mostly semantics, and you have the right to use different terminology than I do. For the sake of clarity, I will use your terminology in the rest of the comment. Two, when Kwame Ture is saying that Western countries had nations before states, I don't think he is quite right. In most cases, the institution of the state predated any coherent national identity. After divine right of monarchs to be the state was called into question, the ruling class promoted the idea of unified nation to justify the legitimacy of state power. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Kwame Ture's comments are entirely accurate either. 3, I come from Poland, the country that had its unified national identity mostly formed under the foreign and oppressive rule. Not the same level of oppression that colonized people suffered, but still. But after achieving independence and continuous focus on national identity led to spreading of chauvinistic ideas quite quickly, and today the focus on our suffering is a key element of Polish exceptionalism. Knowing that, parentheses, and other similar situations from history, most notably today's Israel, end parentheses, I don't accept the nationalism formed from the oppression as simply good nationalism, because the ideas for what national liberation is supposed to mean can vary greatly. The international approach, in quotes, that you have provided sounds like a healthy way to go about, even though I'm not a fan. He says fun, but I think he means fan of Leninism. And I am happy to hear that mainstream left-wing nationalistic ideas in Vietnam are not based on chauvinism. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good comment.
Yeah.
Do you see any other comments that are?
I'm looking, but okay, here's one that so what do you think about this? Nationalism in any shape or form is a disease. The notion that one is subjected to the power of the nation dictates the power relation between an individual and an imagined community. This sounds like an anarchist. It has very little to do with traditional class struggle. There is always an elite of the nation, in parentheses, bourgeois or communist bureaucrats, that will set the tone of what patriotism is and how one should obey to it. What do you think about that?
Wait, can you read that last part again?
There is always an elite of the nation, in parentheses, bourgeois or communist bureaucrats, that will set the tone of what patriotism is and how one should obey it. I mean, first of all, do you think nationalism in any shape or form is a disease?
I think
I mean, so hold on, let me expand on that a little bit. Like, so how can we differentiate between, I mean, ethnic pride or national pride?
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's what I think of when I think of, like, well, I mean, nationalism isn't a. I mean, I'm not necessarily agree with it. I think patriotism is a little bit more of a problem than that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really call it a disease, but I think that I think that nationalism is actually opposed to internationalism.
Yeah.
It the reason why we use the term internationalism is to to show a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Than nationalism. Like nationalism is divorced. Is the national interest there totally divorced from that of other countries? This idea that you have separate interests, right?
Yeah.
And then and so, like, yeah, there's like just because you're internationalist doesn't mean that you're opposed to people within, like, organizing within your nation, or people within your nation organizing with each other, of course, right? But
sure, absolutely. I mean, we support Palestinian nationalism,
right?
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think this is, Yeah, I think this is a problem with this video too. I mean,
but I like that earlier comment where he mentions like, look, when you have nationalism that's based on the fact that, hey, we got oppressed, we need, so, we're Team Red, and Team Red got oppressed, and so we're gonna, oorah, like rah rah, Team Red, and it, maybe like it seems like less harmless on on Monday, but then on Friday, when you're no longer being oppressed, and other people are being oppressed, then maybe it becomes a problem. And I think it does. Like, okay, so like here's another comment from Arthur Vu Von, who writes, as a French Vietnamese, this video and your channel in general is a breath of fresh air. I cannot stress enough how annoying it feels when so many people on the left in my country, France, reject nationalism altogether because they only see it as far-right discourse and would see me as a fascist for loving my country. After all, what motivated the French Revolution was also the idea of love for the nation without chauvinism, and even a lot of internationalism for the time. I always thought cultural habits, history, languages, nature, and everything that makes people or country interesting, beautiful, like I don't think that okay, let me just read the rest. Were to be protected and preserved from uniformization on resulting from capitalism, when the past imperialist governments of my country have done to Vietnam and other colonies were crimes against humanity. One day the French bourgeois capitalist tyranny that still oppresses working class people all over the world will fall and leave place to a beacon of socialism. Prolétaires de toi le pays. I can't speak French. Okay, so I'm not even gonna try. Okay, so anyway, like, yeah, so he says that the French Revolution was like this idea for love of the nation without chauvinism. That's bullshit. The French Revolution was a bourgeois revolution. I'm not saying it wasn't progressive. I mean,
yeah,
right? Like, it overthrew the monarchy, but like the idea that there wasn't any chauvinism after the French Revolution is bullshit, because what happened right after the French Revolution? Napoleon Bonaparte took over Europe.
Yeah. And ushered in Bonapartism. Yeah.
Right.
That's where that comes. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that there's a couple examples here of how the word nationalism is problematic, and it seems like a couple people have a problem with the word nationalism, like, and
yeah, I mean, I don't see. Yeah, I mean, there does needs to be. I mean, I'm happy. I'm proud. I mean, I'm happy to live in Canada and stuff, but I mean, I'm internationalist in that I believe that, I'm lucky enough to be, in a country that, that I'm not living somewhere else that doesn't have to, even though we still have workers struggle in this country, I'm not at the same level as, many people out there that have it worse. And that's why I'm an internationalist, but I still, recognize Canada, as a great place. I mean, I don't think I disagree with the.
Someone writes, nationalism is a really shitty term because it can be pretty much anything: fascism, imperialism, protectionism, isolationism, anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, patriotism. They could all reasonably be called nationalists.
No,
they are
that's
all,
yes.
But that's what Luna is going with this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, yeah. Protectionism is.
Are we just going to call everything
economic? But yeah, I mean, this is where problems throwing these terms together that Yeah, that's not.
It's
not,
creating a bunch of confusion.
Yeah, more confusion.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting video. I kind of think is kind of poorly done. I don't really disagree with all of Luna's messaging, obviously. I mean,
No. I just think I think this might have been constructed a little bit better. I think. And I think moving around.
It was wise to bring up left-wing nationalism, and it didn't explain how Vietnam is nationalist or not nationalist. Like the history lesson of Ho Chi Minh does not help.
No.
Yeah.
No, anyway, I don't think. Yeah.
Should we just wrap up the show here, Andrew?
Sure. Yeah, and if anybody has some videos that that you think we should do a walk through or a watch, yeah, make sure you send us some comments in our Reddit as we kind of retool the show a little bit over the next coming weeks.
Yeah, we'll retool the show. We'll maybe we'll do some more React videos. We're gonna have some like me and Andrew. We're gonna have some meetings on how we want to go forward. We're probably gonna end up. We're thinking what we might end up doing is we might end up doing like kind of a review for what's going on in the Marxist community once a month and pushing it to a once a month, like a monthly thing.
And then do React and maybe some basic some basic Marxist concepts and maybe try and do some videos on that or some shows on that to provide some clarity out there too. So we're just throwing around some ideas right now, but I mean next week we'll be back with our regular what's going on in the community until we have some discussions on how we gonna move forward with our show in the future.
Yeah.
And, thanks for watching this week, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks, guys.